Verses 1 to 4. We have here the interests of the kingdom of heaven successfully carried on, and the powers of darkness appearing against them to put a stop to them. Let Christ's servants be ever so resolute, Satan's agents will be spiteful, and therefore, let Satan's agents be ever so spiteful, Christ's servants ought to be resolute. The apostles, Peter and John, went on in their work, and did not labor in vain. The Spirit enabled the ministers to do their part, and the people theirs. 1. The preachers faithfully deliver the doctrine of Christ, they spoke unto the people, to all that were within hearing, v1. What they said concerned them all, and they spoke it openly and publicly. They taught the people, still taught the people knowledge, taught those that as yet did not believe, for their conviction and conversion, and taught those that did believe, for their comfort and establishment. They preached through Jesus the resurrection from the dead. The doctrine of the resurrection of the dead, 1. Was verified in Jesus, this they proved, that Jesus Christ had risen from the dead, as the first, the chief, that should rise from the dead, ch 26:23. They preached the resurrection of Christ as their warrant for what they did. Or, 2. It is secured by him to all believers. The resurrection of the dead includes all the happiness of the future state. This they preached through Jesus Christ, attainable through him, Philosophy 3:10-11, and through him only. They meddled not with matters of state, but kept to their business, and preached to the people heaven as their end and Christ as their way. CCH 17:18. 2. The hearers cheerfully receive it, for many of those who heard the word believed, not all, perhaps not the most, yet many, to the number of about 5,000, over and above the 3,000 we read of before. See how the gospel got ground, and it was the effect of the pouring out of the Spirit. Though the preachers were persecuted, the word prevailed, for sometimes the church's suffering days have been her growing days, the days of her infancy were so. 2. The chief priests and their party now made head against them, and did what they could to crush them. Their hands were tied a while, but their hearts were not in the least changed. Now here observe, 1. Who they were that appeared against the apostles. They were the priests, you may be sure. In the first place, they were always sworn enemies to Christ and his gospel. They were as jealous for their priesthood as Caesar for his monarchy, and would not bear one they thought their rival now, when he was preached as a priest, as much as when he himself preached as a prophet. With them was joined the captain of the temple, who, it is supposed, was a Roman officer, governor of the garrison placed in the tower of Antonia, for the guard of the temple, so that still here were both Jews and Gentiles confederate against Christ. The Sadducees also, who denied the being of spirits and the future state, were zealous against them. One would wonder, saith Mr. Baxter, what should make such brutists as the Sadducees were to be such furious silencers and persecutors. If there is no life to come, what harm can other men's hopes of it do them? But in depraved souls all faculties are vitiated. A blind man has a malignant heart and a cruel hand, to this day. 2. How they stood affected to the apostles' preaching, they were grieved that they taught the people, v2. It grieved them, both that the gospel doctrine was so preached, so publicly, so boldly, and that the people were so ready to hear it. They thought, when they had put Christ to such an ignominious death, his disciples would ever after be ashamed and afraid to own him, and the people would have invincible prejudices against his doctrine, and now it vexed them to see themselves disappointed, and that his gospel got ground, instead of losing it. The wicked shall see it, and be grieved, PS 112:10. They were grieved at that which they should have rejoiced in, at that which angels rejoice in. Miserable is their case to whom the glory of Christ's kingdom is a grief, for, since the glory of that kingdom is everlasting, it follows of course that their grief will be everlasting too. It grieved them that the apostles preached through Jesus the resurrection from the dead. The Sadducees were grieved that the resurrection from the dead was preached, for they opposed that doctrine, and could not bear to hear of a future state, to hear it so well attested. The chief priests were grieved that they preached the resurrection of the dead through Jesus, that he should have the honor of it, and, though they professed to believe the resurrection of the dead against the Sadducees, yet they would rather give up that important article than have it preached and proved to be through Jesus. 3. How far they proceeded against the apostles, v3 they laid hands on them, that is, their servants and officers did at their command, and put them in hold, committed them to the custody of the proper officer until the next day. They could not examine them now, for it was eventide, and yet would defer it no longer than till next day. See how God trains up his servants for sufferings by degrees, and by less trials prepares them for greater. Now they resist unto bonds only, but afterwards to blood.